I've been invited here this morning to talk with you about a project that I'm working on in Ghana. As I was thinking about what to talk about, how to present this, it occurred to me that actually there are events going on in Africa today that are very similar to what was going on at a time when I started to think about leaving Microsoft to return home. And the events going on are once again an indication of a crisis of leadership on the African continent. Just one door away from Ghana, Côte d'Ivoire has suffered strife, very serious civil conflict that has affected millions of lives. People have had to be dislocated from their homes. People have died. And it's all because of poor leadership. At Ashesi, we were actually recently involved with a multinational company working with them about developing some content, some educational content for their staff. That project was put on hold because of the events in Côte d'Ivoire. This is a company that now has plants shut down in the Ivory Coast. They have workers that they maintained on their workforce, and they're having to pay them cash, taking big risks. And suddenly everything stops. There is a huge human cost to what has happened in the Ivory Coast. And there's also a huge economic cost that we don't see immediately, or that's not as much in the news, but that is a real problem because it affects populations for a long time. In 1995, when I became a parent, I really went through this period of introspection about my life, what my life ought to be about, what Africa meant for my children, and what Africa would mean for my children's children. And at the time, Somalia was disintegrating into anarchy. Rwanda had suffered serious genocidal war. 2 doors from Ghana, Liberia had problems, Sierra Leone had serious problems. Liberia, over a period of 15 years, destroyed their infrastructure in civil war. They had no electricity grid by the end of 1990, by the end of the 1990s. This is a huge challenge. And the reason I was reflecting on these events in Africa, and the reasons I reflect on them now, is that it seems to me that the state of the African continent will affect my children. Even if I were to raise them in an upper middle class neighborhood in Seattle. Why do I say that? When I was in college, I decided to major in economics. Actually, I wanted to major in engineering and decided to add a second major because it was profoundly interesting to me, the phenomenon that had happened in Asia with the Asian tigers. In the 1950s and 1960s, most Asian economies were not a lot better than Africa's economy. The world for Asians in the 1960s is dramatically different than it is today. And the change that has occurred in Asia has affected people of Asian descent everywhere on the planet. And it has made the world a better place. It has lifted so many people from poverty. Hundreds of millions, billions of people have been lifted from poverty and are making a very meaningful contribution in the world. And I feel that we need a similar phenomenon in Africa. So the question for me became, how do I contribute towards that? Initially, I thought I would go back to Ghana and I would start a software company and engage in that way. But that idea was scuttled fairly quickly, because when I went back to Ghana to explore this idea, I realized that all of my classmates who had gone to college in Ghana, who had studied computer science, had learned to write programs on paper. Their education did not include designing and writing and executing code on computers because of an extreme lack of resources in Ghana's public universities. Now, that's sort of like learning how to play soccer by drawing a soccer ball or drawing a technique for kicking a soccer ball. It just doesn't work. So this was difficult. I realized, well, I can't really start a software company that'll be meaningful if there isn't the human capital to enable this company to be globally competitive. So I started to ask a bunch of other questions with my friends and my family. And we would take any problem, whether it is building open drains in our urban cities and breeding mosquitoes through that method, or how our hospitals were running, or the schools, or economic policy. Take any problem and ask, why is this the way it is? And I'd get a set of answers and take each of those answers and ask why. And we never got lower than 3 levels deep before the answer would be, well, the people in charge are doing it this way. So we never got more than 3 levels deep before the answer would be a question of leadership across the board, not just political leadership, but all the people in positions of influence, all the decision makers, people making major decisions that will affect millions of people. The decisions that we're making to accept the status quo, the corruption that was occurring, particularly in the public sector, in the civil service. And so it seemed like leadership was this core problem that needed to be addressed. And of course, there's always exceptions. There are always a few people, a few individuals that you see engaged in a very positive manner. But there was this pervasive leadership crisis that I saw. And so then the question became, why are the leaders all behaving this way? The answer came to me actually first from my late father. And you know, I hate to admit it, but when he told me the answer, I didn't hear it because it was Dad. And then it came to me again from my cousin, who had stayed in Ghana for his education. The way my dad put it was, we were discussing engineering, and he said, you know, it's interesting. When I talk to those of you who studied engineering in the United States, you don't seem to have studied all that much engineering. But in every project that I've worked on, the US educated engineers come up with solutions faster than everybody else. They come up with very creative solutions to the problems. My cousin put it differently. We were talking about some problem with the media. And he said to me, it's very interesting, those of you who've been educated in the US, because this problem you're grappling with, I don't think about. Those of us who stayed here, we just accept things the way they are. And it's interesting that you are engaged with something that's not your area of expertise, but you're really actually trying to come up with a solution to this problem. And that was my aha moment, because my dad had said it, my cousin had said it. There seemed to be something about those people who studied at Dartmouth and Columbia and Swarthmore and Harvard and so on. And it has to do with the liberal education, I think. An education that teaches people to see problems from different perspectives. An education that empowers people to be creative